Hello, this is Andy Bannister, the Director of the Solas Centre for Public Christianity, and I'm delighted to endorse and recommend the ministry of Deeper Waters Apologetics. I've been hugely impressed watching the work that Nick has done over the years, building up the website and the podcast, the quality of the guests that he gets onto there, and I love the way that the ministry challenges and encourages both Christians and those who don't have a Christian faith to really think through the claims of the gospel. I'm also impressed by just how Christ-centered Nick is and all that he does. It's his desire to see people encounter Jesus Christ and the life-transforming truth of the gospel. So more strength to them. It's been a privilege to know Nick over the years, and I hope Deeper Waters goes from strength to strength. And if you haven't yet discovered it, check out the website deeperwatersapologetics.com for yourself.
You stand on the shore of the ocean watching the tide come in. You sense the call of the sea beckoning to take you further. You step forward little by little, not knowing what to expect, but expecting more. You keep going as the ocean calls you to enter in to deeper waters.
Everyone, and welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast. I am Nick Peters, your host, seeking to bring you the very best in Christian scholarship and apologetics. And today, no exception again. And we're continuing talking about Autism Awareness Month. Now, last week we answered the question, who's your favorite guest to have on? Because I did have my favorite on, and I'm sure my guests will understand today when I say my favorite guest to have on was when I had my wife on the show. No one else competes with that one. But we do have some great guests today here, because now we're not talking about two people with Asperger's who are married, but one who has it and one who doesn't. And we brought back one of our favorites on here, someone who's been on the show. I believe this is going to be his fourth time, so he must really like us a lot or something. And that's Dr. Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe, who is on the spectrum. And his wife, Kathy, is with us this time, who is what we call a neurotypical, not on the spectrum. And I'm seeing them here right now on a webcam. It's simply adorable seeing them together here. But here is some information about them. Astronomer and best-selling author Hugh Ross travels the globe speaking on the compatibility of advancing scientific discoveries with timeless truths of Christianity. His organization, Reasons to Believe, is dedicated to demonstrating via a variety of resources and events that science and biblical faith are allies, not enemies. Working alongside Hugh is his wife, Kathy. She holds a master's degree in English from the University of Southern California, worked in communications there, and later taught at Pasadena City College. In addition to editing Hugh's books, Kathy serves as a vice president at RTB, overseeing multiple ministry departments. So, Dr. Ross and Mrs. Ross, welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
And now, normally I start asking a bit about how y'all got to be doing what you're doing, but that's kind of a whole story here about how you are kind of cross each other's paths, how you got married, and what's it like being in a sort of mixed marriage of sorts. So, tell us a little bit of a story about how you two came to get to know each other.
Well,
You want to tell her?
Well, I was at Caltech, and there was this professor there who was a Christian. I was leading 2 Bible studies, and he says, Hugh, you need to attend this other Bible study. I said, Dave, I'm way too busy. Mm-hmm. Well, he talked to me the next day. He said, I called him and I told him that you're coming. So I was a little bit upset at Dave because my schedule was so full, but I rode my bike to the Bible study. And when I walked in, it's like everybody knew I was from Caltech, and I couldn't figure out why.
It was very obvious.
What, were you wearing like a Caltech t-shirt or something?
Oh, no, it was worse than that, Nick. He was wearing plaid pants. They were very high above his ankles because, you don't want to get your cuffs caught in the bike chain. Mustard-colored socks, a striped shirt that totally mismatched. He was bald on top, had his hair wild and sticking out on the sides, and he had ridden up on a bicycle with a bungee cord strapped to his Bible to the back. Now, I showed up there in my sports car with all the other young professionals in the group, many of whom we weren't proud of we didn't have wealth or anything, but, we just considered ourselves to be normal folks, many of my friends in that study were aiming for careers in ministry. But yeah, when Hugh walked through the door, we all just kind of chuckled a little bit. And
I remember they asked me, Hugh, where did you buy those clothes? I told them I bought my clothes at the supermarket.
Dr. Ross, I'm remembering when I did my first interview with you about Asperger's, I asked you about the Big Bang Theory, the show, not the actual scientific theory, and you said they had to tone it down quite a lot because we're even nerdier than that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm seeing what you meant by that right now.
Yes. And Nick, he, of course, being on the spectrum, he did not make good eye contact. But here's what impressed me. I was at the Bible study because I really wanted to dig into Scripture. In fact, I had wanted to go to seminary because I grew up wanting to be a missionary. The reason I wanted to be a missionary is because I heard missionary stories of people coming to faith in Christ, not just one or two every few years, but people who were so thrilled to hear the gospel and just would give their lives to Christ and be transformed. And that's what I wanted to see happen. And I didn't see it happening around me in church. And I thought, okay, so I want to be a missionary. I figured I'd need to go to seminary, but I hadn't figured out how to afford to go to seminary. I did have a scholarship and then a fellowship to get my master's degree and then a college teaching credential. So I was serious in this Bible study and really wanting to dig in because my desire was to somehow be able to lead people to Christ. But there was a little bit of a blockage for me, and that was when I was in college. Somewhere along the way, my beloved brother, whom I looked up to and leaned on for most of my life, he basically told me that science proved to him that the Bible isn't true, that the Bible just wasn't scientifically credible, and he was going to pursue other truth. That threw me for a loop, and I just thought, wow, I don't know how to answer him. I had not studied much science, and I just had always assumed that somehow the Bible would be credible scientifically and otherwise. So you can imagine how stunned I was when this science guy walked into the Bible study and sat down with us. And when we opened the Scripture, the thing that impressed me immediately was the solidity of Hugh's faith, that this book is the Word of God. So I thought, I need to ask him some questions. So after the study was over, the formal part of the study, and we broke up for just a little time of refreshments, I made a beeline to Hugh. I introduced myself, and I said, I can see you're a scientist. That was a little presumptuous. Sorry about that, Hugh. Anyway, I said, I really would like to know how you as a scientist handle for example, the opening chapters of Scripture. How do you understand that? And I'd sure like to hear your explanation. So his immediate response startled me because he said, well, that opening chapter of the Bible is what really arrested my attention and actually led to, it played a part in my coming to faith in Christ. now I'm really stunned, and I asked for a little explanation if he wouldn't mind. And so within a few minutes' time, he was kind enough to take me through, always looking down at the floor, mind you, but he took me through the first chapter of Genesis and into the second chapter, and just kind of explained very briefly his perspective on how it matched the findings. You know, it wasn't like this is the only way to believe this text, but this is how it lines up if you need to know. It harmonizes beautifully. Well, I was so thrilled. I ran out the door, jumped in my car, and drove to my parents' house and just said, Mom, Dad, I met this guy who really, he explained to me how science and scripture actually go together, that the scripture is credible from a scientific perspective. I'm talking to a guy from Caltech, and they were just so happy and thought that was wonderful. And so that was our meeting. That was our first time of meeting.
Do you all remember what the Bible study was about?
We were in the book of, was it Ephesians?
Yeah, the way the Bible study worked is because it was a mixture. Everybody was a young professional. About half of them were married, and the rest of us were single. But each one of us would take turns leading the study. Mm-hmm. And so, we would pick a text that we wanted to explain to the rest of the group, and then we would break up and discuss it. And so, depending who was teaching, we'd be going through different texts. But I think the day you arrived, Kathy, it was a New Testament text.
Yeah.
It was Ephesians.
I think
it
we
was
were in
Ephesians,
right. The first chapter.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, Dr. Ross, and she said you were looking down. I know that's something we do on the spectrum, that eye contact isn't our favorite thing in the world, but I'm also curious, was it also not only because you were talking with another person, but you think it could have also been you were talking to a female, because that had made it even harder to make eye contact?
No, I didn't make eye contact with anybody.
Okay.
I mean, for example, the thing about astronomy is it seems to attract people who are intelligent and on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So I thought I was normal because everybody else that I dealt with at Caltech, they weren't making eye contact either. In fact, I can remember a big conversation we had in the hallway at the astronomy lab building, and there were 8 of us very vigorously talking to one another. All 8 of us were just staring directly at the floor. So... There's one professor I wanted to talk to there, one researcher, and he was so far in the spectrum, he just yelled at me and said, "Get out, I can't talk to you." And he says, "But I don't like you, I just can't handle a human being in my office here." He could give a lecture in front of 1,000 people, but he couldn't engage people one-on-one or one-on-two. So I learned just to stay away from it.
Kathy, I'm not sure if you know about the story, but I found out about Dr. Ross being on the spectrum because my father-in-law is Michael Acona, and we'd heard this story about how the astronomy community seems to attract people on the spectrum. He was at a conference once, and he said, "Well, Hugh Ross is here. I'll ask him if he knows anyone on the spectrum." So that was Dr. Ross. My daughter and son-in-law, they both of them have Asperger's, and they've heard that there's a lot of astronomers who have a condition. Do you know anyone on the spectrum there? Just, I have Asperger's. Dr. Ross, did you know at the time of this Bible study that you have a condition called Asperger's?
No, I didn't know. In fact, it was a few decades afterwards before I found out. I think I was in my late 50s when a friend of ours who's a therapist, she says, "Hugh, I've noticed you can't talk to my husband without colliding with him all the time. Have you ever
when you're hiking or walking?"
Well, we were in a supermarket. I just kept bumping into him. And, when I wasn't talking, I could maintain control of my body just fine. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Have you ever thought that you might be on this spectrum?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, why don't you go online and take some tests?" She recommended one test and said, if you get a score 24 to 50, you're on the spectrum. If you're less than that, you're not. So I took the test, and I was 48 out of 50. Mm-hmm. A few more tests, and said, "Yeah, I guess I'm on the spectrum."
I'm curious, when she made that suggestion to you, did it seem like an insult or anything at the time, or what?
No, I just said, well, maybe this is something I need to look into. And maybe this explains why I've had problems in our relationship, not just with my wife, but with my sons. So I said, I need to find out. Yeah, our staff. I said, I need to check this out. This might help.
Okay, so we'll get into that story later on because it's after you got married and such. So, Kathy, you go home and you tell everyone about this guy that you've met and such. And now, I'm curious, did your mother kind of suspect that there would be something more going on here? Because mother sometimes have that intuition.
Yes, but no one in this case suspected anything because at the time, Hugh was not even a candidate. I never even considered him a candidate for a relationship for multiple reasons. Number one, I knew that he was here at Caltech on a visa from Canada, a postdoctoral study visa. So my assumption was after three years,
right,
he would be returning to Canada or some other part of the world to continue his research. So in that respect, he wasn't a candidate. In another respect, he did not appear to be interested in dating or anything. In fact, there was one young woman in the study that was interested in him, I saw her trying to pursue him a little bit, and I just thought, no.
And I had no clue.
And he was clueless, but, I just thought he is interested in two things only. Number one, he's interested in seeing people come to faith in Christ. Number two, he's interested in his research. But, what appealed to me, I remember after knowing Hugh for a few months, or actually it was probably more like a year, and just watching his life and watching the way he would, take any opportunity to turn the conversation to, spiritual truth and just really share evidence for Christianity for his faith with anybody. And I remember saying to God, if there's any way I can be supportive of him in his evangelistic ministry, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. So I remember actually asking God, how can I be supportive of Hugh in his ministry? And the first thing that came to mind was, by this time I was teaching at the college, and Hugh was putting together materials to hand out when he was doing evangelistic volunteer work for the church. Well, I read some of his materials and I thought, oh no, it was very, very formal language, lengthy. I remember one sentence was an entire paragraph, just clause after clause. And, I'm an English teacher, and I'm also working with freshmen and sophomores who, they would not even be able to understand this material at all. So I remember having the courage to ask Hugh if he would mind my editing some of the materials he was putting together, and I wasn't sure what to expect because, editors and writers they're a little sensitive about having their stuff worked on. But he responded with such humility. He was just, oh, would you help? So he was willing to accept my help. So I rewrote the materials for him, and I thought, I wonder if he's going to approve or be mad or whatever. And he looked at what I had done. Oh, this is really good. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So I thought, oh, well, maybe God will allow me to be a help to him in some way.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. Ross, let me also ask you about this, and I don't mean to sound like an intrusive question, but how old were both of you at the time?
I was 28 or 29 when I met Kathy. Yeah, 29.
Yes, 26.
I find that interesting because I was 28 when I met Ari and 29 when I married her, nearly 30 and such. So, Dr. Ross, when you had met Kathy the first time, was there any spark of romantic interest for you there in her? Or?
Well, Kathy was right. I was not looking for any kind of relationship. Mm-hmm. In fact, what Dave told me, he says, Hugh, this study is filled with young professionals, half of them are trying to prepare for ministry. They don't know how to do evangelism.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought my role in the study is to train these people how to be more effective in evangelism. And that was quite a challenge because never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I knew I was heading on to go to some other back. I thought I was going to probably go back to Canada. If not, I was going to go to Europe. So I looked at my time there as temporary, and my research at that time was really intensive. I just didn't have time for any kind of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But he was open to suggestions about how to improve in his communication.
Mm-hmm.
That was really something that impressed me deeply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that can be something pretty difficult for us on a spectrum sometimes. Correction is not an easy thing to receive.
Right.
For anyone, but I think it can be even harder on a spectrum. Okay, so you two are, I'd say you at this point you both consider each other friends. And
Yes.
you're working together and such. When did it change?
Well,
Let's just say, Nick, you were a lot quicker. You met your wife at 28 or 29, and you married by the time you were 30.
Mm-hmm.
Hugh was 32, and I was 29 by the time we got married.
Mm-hmm.
So it took us longer to figure out that there was more than friendship.
well, we were friends for a good 2 years, and what I noticed was that Kathy was getting more involved. She was the one that was most eager to get equipped and become effective in evangelism. And there was a study that because I watched another Bible study, and it was a study filled with a lot of young women who had come out of some really difficult circumstances. And so I thought, I need a woman here because often what was happening, there was counseling sessions after the study was over. So I asked Kathy if she'd be willing to help out, and she did. So we were working together in this study. And what I noticed was our people in the study and our friends and people at church, they were noticing
Strangers.
things, even strangers, because church would sometimes send the two of us out to visit a couple that was in serious marriage difficulty. So we were actually working together as marriage counselors. And, we'd be talking to this couple, and they would ask us how long we'd been married. And we said, well, we're not even dating. And after this happened about 4 times, we began to wonder, what is it that these people are seeing? And then I thought, well, Kathy's not interested. She's giving me no signals at all. But I kept sending her things, Bible study notes and stuff, and I thought I was making it clear that I had an interest in her, but she just wasn't picking up on it. And she was having the same response to me. I just wasn't picking up on anything from her. So I wound up sending her a letter because I said, the only way I'm going to actually be able to communicate how I feel about her is through writing because nothing else is working. So I sent her a letter, and she sent me a letter back.
The scariest letter you've ever received, right?
Yes, I honestly was excited and confused when I got his letter because, he just said, would like to spend time with you on my day off. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure what this means. I think that means he wants to sort of date me, but anyway, at this point I realized that I was trying hard not to give clue because I was getting no signals from him. I definitely recognized that I was talking about Hugh all the time. I remember going on a water ski trip with my relatives one weekend, and by the end of the weekend, I was so embarrassed because I realized, my goodness, I talked about Hugh Ross again and again throughout the weekend, and my family was noticing, my relatives were noticing and kind of snickering a little bit because they kept hearing about this Hugh Ross. Well, part of my excitement was that after meeting Hugh and getting answers to my scientific questions, and just it revolutionized my courage, I would say, in talking to my students about Christ, or anyone. I would talk to anyone about Christ because I was no longer afraid of the science questions that I assumed would come up. In fact, I had some really intriguing information from Hugh that would get me into conversations and allow me to take my time to defend the reliability of Scripture. So for the first time, I'm actually having the experience of leading people to seeing them come to faith in Christ after, my sharing with them. To me, that was the most exhilarating thing I had ever experienced. And I was so thankful to God and so excited about, this change in my own life, and grateful for Hugh and the influence he had that allowed this. So I was pretty deeply committed to Hugh, but I thought he's not interested in a relationship. And, he just, anyway, so the letter came and I'm like, oh, so he is interested, I think, and he at least wants to spend time with me. So I think that means he's interested. I wasn't sure. So as I say, I wrote back and said, here's my phone number. And he had asked me in the letter, I think, didn't you mention that you wanted to invite me over for dinner?
Yeah, I had you over for dinner.
Yes. So he invited me over for dinner and made dinner for me. And then I invited him over for dinner and made dinner for him. We had really long conversations about each other and our past during those dinners. I had dated many guys, and I thought I need to let him know about some of my relationships in the past and how they went. They didn't always go the way they should, but at any rate, I thought he needs to know that I've got some baggage, some deep hurts from past relationships, so that he'll be aware of that. And and then I found out he had never really dated anyone. And I thought, okay, well, we got a blank slate here.
That was going to be my very next question. I was saying, so Dr. Ross, is this going to be your first ever romantic relationship and such? And I'm guessing the answer is yes.
Well, the only previous things is, sometimes I would win an award and they would tell me I had to bring someone. So I would ask a girl to go with me to an event.
Twice.
But it was always just a single event. I never dated a gal twice. Mm-hmm. Kathy was the first woman that I ever dated twice. Mm-hmm. So and it was the only one I was ever serious about. Mm-hmm. The other ones were basically just to fulfill an obligation that I had. Mm-hmm. So.
And it sounds like in this story that both of you were sending signals to one another, and both of you were oblivious to what the other one was saying.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
You got
That's why it took us so long. I mean, literally, we were doing ministry together, and people were thinking we were a married couple. That went on for, 9 or 10 months.
Yeah.
Before we figured, well, maybe there's something there.
The people in our Bible study were kind of giggling because they realized what was happening and that we didn't realize what was happening. So it was kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, well, when we kind of announced a war about Allie and I had started dating, most of my friends were like, yeah, we kind of saw this coming. My own ministry partner, when I emailed him, said, yeah, I thought I should know. Just let her change things. I know he's going to start dating now. He's like, I knew it. I knew this was going to happen.
Wow. I have to say, too, that, I didn't know about, Asperger's back in the day, there wasn't even a name for that. And autism was not even really that well known and understood at all. All I knew was that Hugh had unusual deficits when it came to reading body language and reading emotions. And I knew that would interfere with his ministry. But I also knew that whenever I pointed something out to him that could help, he would write it down on a card and think about it, and then he would come back, like at the Bible study, for example. He would teach, and most of the people in the study had just they had such different backgrounds. And I realized that some of the things that he was teaching were going right past them. So I would just say, I remember going outside and just saying, Hugh, it would really help if you gave examples when you describe a biblical principle. Provide an example that relates to their life, and that will really help. And by the way, it would really help if you looked a little more like the rest of us. And then they wouldn't just always say, well, Hugh's just different. Hugh's just strange, And so he said, well, what do you mean? What should I do? And he pulled out a card, and I just gave him some basic notes about the length of his pants, the haircut that he needed. Don't mix plaids and stripes. Wear dark socks, not these bright yellow things. I went over some basics like that, and I was trying so hard not to be insulting, but just to say, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of having these people receive what you're saying, you just need to take the friction out of it, and your appearance causes some friction. Well, I had no idea how he would respond to that, and I was kind of quaking in my boots, because I remember one of my boyfriends, I had told him that his tie clashed with his jacket, and he wouldn't speak to me for like a week. So anyway, this was... I thought I'm really being bold here, but the very next week, he went to a department store in Pasadena and met up with a salesperson there and purchased new pants, new shirts, socks. He got a haircut and came back the next week, and everybody in the study was like, whoa, whoa. They were so impressed that he would do that he would dramatically change his normal behavior pattern in order to have more of an impact.
Well, you also told me not to use so many 4 and 5 syllable words.
Yeah, we worked on language a bit. Yeah. We worked on eye contact. That took longer. The eye contact thing took a little longer. That was
about 30 years.
That was
just a little bit.
It was funny because I told him he needed to look at people at their at them when he's teaching them, and because we were at this point now, we were also in a Sunday class together, if I remember right. And so in the Sunday class, he would be looking at the wall above their heads and not making eye contact. So I said, you need to really look at people. So the next week, he picked 2 people to look at.
And just one.
I think the first week it was 1, and then I said, you gotta, move. Then, so he stared at that person through the whole study and made them so uncomfortable. It was like, oh no, this is not working. So then I told him, look, you need to look at more people, not just one person, but look to the right, look to the left, center, right, left, center, back again. Mm-hmm. And so the next week, his eyes just darted all over the room. Now everybody's really like, what's wrong with you? So after the class, I'm like, okay, this is great, but you need to do that. Anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what was the most difficult thing when I followed her instructions and actually began to look at people and pause and look at someone else. I would completely lose my place and where I was in my teaching. And I would get lost, and I realized, oh no, I can't actually engage people with eye contact and know where I am in my study at the same time. I got to pick one or the other. So that's what I figure. I'm going to need to develop visuals, not so much for the audience, but in order that I don't lose my place.
Kathy, could you repeat again what happened after the whole darting thing? The connection kind of jumped again, so I'd like to have that for the audience.
Oh, okay. Yes, his eyes were darting around the room, which was very unnerving to the people in the class. So I simply met with him afterward and said, well, you certainly did move your eyes around more. However, you have to pause when you're looking, just, count to 1 or 2 and before you look at another person. Anyway, he had real trouble with that, as he said, because he lost his place. But he worked on it. I think what impressed me, Nick, is that whatever suggestions I made to try to help him be a better communicator, to connect more with his audience, and he would work at it. And that impressed me so much, that he was willing to work at it. So my admiration for him grew. And, when I read scripture and I saw that the main role of the husband is to love his wife, and critical thing for the wife is to respect her husband. And I thought, I could respect. Hugh is the man the one man I've ever spent time with, consistent time with, and who grew in my respect through time. The more I knew him, the more I respected him. And the more I saw his heart, and his heart was fixed on things that were enduring, things that were eternal, not things that were time-bound. And that was so important to me. So that drew me to him. And even though there wasn't I don't know that there was a strong physical attraction, especially in the beginning. It was more of just an attraction to the person whom he was. And I just kept thinking, I think, the two of us together both kind of came to the conclusion, I think, that we were better together than apart.
That's true.
Dr. Ross, I'm curious, when she gives you suggestions like don't wear plaids with stripes and things like that, you write them down, but at the same time, it's probably thinking, I'm writing these down, but they really don't make much sense to me.
Well, I knew they didn't make any sense to me. What she's telling me is it makes sense to everybody else. And when I followed her instructions, I said, wow, she's right. People actually feel more comfortable when I'm teaching, when I kind of look like the rest of them. Mm-hmm. So I said, I've always chosen my clothes and my appearance based on cost
and convenience.
So, I would buy pants that were for Army soldiers that would last for 10 years and were dirt cheap. And I thought, well, this is an economical way to go. But I realized, okay, I'm saving a lot of money, but I'm actually causing problems in my communication. So, and also noticed that, for me, when I would make meals for people, taste wasn't a factor. What was a factor is that they were healthy and nutritious meals. And she helped me they got to look attractive on the plate. I said, why? And she explained why. Maybe you need to try to make the food a little more flavorful. So she taught me how to be more hospitable and then how to engage, because I felt it was really important. I saw this in the Bible. We're all to be hospitable, and how hospitality is a tool God gives us to be more effective in evangelism. And so we began actually having people over after we were married. And
even while we were dating.
Even while we were dating.
You had a nice big dining room table at your place, so we would cook.
And have families over.
And have people over after church. New people at church. We would spot the new people and say, hey, would you like to have lunch? And so we would go back to your place and fix lunch for them and have a spiritual conversation. So
this gets me wondering also, when you talk about his place and such, when you walked into like his house or apartment, whatever it was, for the first time, did it look really, really different from what you normally expect? Oh, you're laughing. This can't be good.
You want me to tell? I gotta tell you this. In order to have a dining room, he put a dining room table in what was the bedroom of his one-bedroom apartment, and the apartment just happened to have a very large closet, and his mattress for sleeping was in the closet. So the living room had your typical, it did have a couch and a coffee table.
And a lot of books.
And stacks of books. And the bedroom had a dining room table and chairs. And he slept in the closet with his clothes hanging above his head.
Wow.
I thought, oh boy.
Well, I felt it was important to have people over to my place. I wanted the dining room to look right, but yeah, that meant the only place for me to sleep was the closet, so that's where I slept.
So when people came over, we kept the closet door shut so that they would think that was the other bedroom in the place. So anyway.
I'm guessing that's probably changed since then, hasn't it?
It has changed. Although the books are still everywhere.
Yeah, at this point, Hugh has learned to sacrifice certain things just for the sake of his sons. Like, for example, I can tell you, Nick, that our younger son developed an interest in drumming, and he became very, very good as a drummer. So when we moved into this house, instead of furnishing the living room, we have a family room, which is thank God we have the family room where we can actually, have a couch and chairs and sit together. But the living room became the band room.
Well, the band room and the telescope room.
Yeah, so we keep his telescopes in that room, and the drum set and the amplifiers and the guitar stands and the keyboard for the... Now, our son, he's in grad school now, and he's past his days of having the band here, but...
He's still got his drums.
He still has his drums stored here, and we're just giving him time to, figure out where he's going to live and where he's going to store them. So the nice thing about Hugh is that just meeting him and getting to know him, and I became a lot more flexible and adaptable about things. It just, I've learned a lot from Hugh. Things don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be the way everybody else has them. They can be whatever works for us.
If it's any consolation to you, Kathy, my wife goes crazy with all the books we have around here. I was like, we can't have any more books! We can't have any more books! Yeah, we kind of have to.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, Nick, in our case, I'm a book person too. As you can imagine, I was an English major, right? Yeah. So I love books. So I contribute to the problem almost as much as Hugh does. So I'm talking to Hugh now that, we have books here in stacks everywhere, but at the office, his office is filled floor to ceiling. Thank the Lord, he provided bookcases, floor-to-ceiling bookcases all around the room. But I said, Hugh, what happens when you retire someday? What do we do with all those books? Well,
the drums will be gone by
now. The drums will be gone. So, I guess we'll move. But I thought, mainly you'll probably end up donating the library to reasons to believe. Yeah. So, anyway.
Now, Heavy, you'd said that you didn't think there was much physical attraction in relationship and such at the start, and I know it can be awkward for people on the spectrum. I mean, was there any trouble with physical interaction when you were dating and such, or...?
I think we decided to just be very patient with each other and I thought he just didn't want to be touched, and because when we weren't dating, before we were dating, if I would bump into him.
Kathy, can you start that again? We had the same thing happen again.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so yeah, I was kind of concerned about it because before we were dating, if I would brush against Hugh when we were working in the kitchen or something, he would sort of pull away. It was awkward. He would jump back. Touch was somehow awkward. But then I noticed that as soon as we were dating, touch was no longer, he didn't pull away. Mm-hmm. And not knowing what this was all about, not understanding anything about autism at the time. Mm-hmm. What I learned later and figured out as we went was that when the relationship is defined then things become appropriate and they're not confusing. So touch was no longer confusing. But he was also very cautious, and he wanted to ask before, like I remember Hugh asked me, is it okay with you if we hold hands? And I said, absolutely, that's appropriate. And then he would say, at what point, he would then say, is it okay if we hug? Is it okay if we kiss? Are you comfortable with that? This is what I feel is in my comfort zone right now. So I thought, okay, he is trying to make clear what things mean, so that there's no confusion about what this means. And within this relationship, as it progressed toward, I thought it was progressing toward marriage. He never really made that abundantly clear. So there was a time when I was like, I wonder if he's ever really going to propose, or if this is going to be a lifelong dating relationship. But anyway, but we continued that way.
That. I said, we can't progress a relationship.
Oh, because I hadn't met your parents.
You hadn't met my parents, yeah. And I wanted a clear endorsement from your parents. I actually, while we were dating, I had her parents over without Kathy being there. But I made the mistake of serving them Korean chicken livers. And I didn't realize they had never eaten liver before, so let alone Korean chicken livers. So
they were like, he's a little strange. And the other thing is, he's Canadian. He grew up in a non-Christian family, never had gone to church. His parents were not believers. And I grew up in America, in fact, in Southern California, in a total Christian cocoon, I would say. And my parents were a little concerned that we were so culturally and personally different that this could be problematic.
Well, I saw that they were concerned just how different we were. So that was one reason why I was being cautious.
Yeah, you were hesitant.
But I really wanted their approval before moving the relationship forward. And I wanted my parents to get to know Kathy. And, they're up in Canada, so we had some phone calls. I really wanted them to be able to meet her personally. And so I was reluctant to propose to her until there was that face-to-face contact between Kathy and the parents. But, I was having visa issues at the time. So it was just very difficult.
Now, Dr. Ross, it seems kind of surprising me, but it seems like if we're talking about the physical aspect of the relationship, it seemed like you might actually have been the one who was more aggressive in this end than Kathy was.
Well, once I found out that I was on the spectrum, a lot of people came to me and said, I got a daughter, a son is on the spectrum. They don't like to be touched. Mm-hmm. And I remember my parents saying that to all their friends, don't touch Hugh. He doesn't like to be touched.
He doesn't like to be hugged, I remember.
And it's not that they don't like to be touched, it's that they can't interpret what the touch means. Mm. So when we were dating, I wanted to make sure that I was very clear about, understanding what the physical contact's all about. So I tell people it's not that people on the spectrum don't like to be touched, is that they have difficulty interpreting what it means, and if you explain what it means, then it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I tell people it's quite odd that we've gone for the 5 love languages together, and one of my love languages is physical touch. But it only applies to Allie. I don't really want anyone else touching me. And right. Allie's kind of like my guardian, in fact, especially since I've got scoliosis. I've got a steel rod on my spine. Oh, and wow. So if someone gives me a pat on the back, she knows I'm immediately awkward with it. And says, don't touch him on the back. He's got a steel rod there. He doesn't like that. Now, Allie can give me a nice, gentle back rub, and that's fine and such. But anything else, no, I don't want other people touching me too much besides her.
Right. And to be honest, Nick, I don't know if you had problems with this, but Hugh didn't actually know how, for example, he didn't know how to kiss really well. So it was kind of interesting to try to, I felt like, you know what, we're going to learn together how to relate to each other physically. So we just committed to being really patient and, kind of
we're still working
going
on
along,
that, really.
So it's to me that's been the one of the good things about our relationship is just I thought, we need to teach each other how we want to be loved and how we want to, what seems good to us, what's endearing and
Kathy,
what's not.
It's gotten a lot better since we the spectrum.
Yeah, because I know what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
It was confusing because he didn't know how to interpret my feel. I guess the challenge, Nick, and I don't know if you've seen this in your relationship with Allie, but Hugh cannot read my feelings. Mm-hmm. Now, God prepared me for this relationship in the sense that my mom, who's not on the spectrum or wasn't on the spectrum, but she, just by her personality or nature or whatever, she had a really hard time reading my feelings all the time that I was growing up. My dad was able to much better than my mom was. But so I was used to being loved. She loved me, but she just couldn't understand my feelings. So I guess it wasn't so foreign to me when I married someone who had trouble understanding or reading my feelings. But I also was much more emotionally up and down. And the nice thing about Hugh was that he was so steady. He was steady, very upbeat and solid. And I was, so he'd be going along in a straight line, and I'd be up and down, up and down.
But I had no idea you were going up and down.
But see, that's the problem. I had to tell him when I was up or when I was down. I would have to because I tried giving him clues. You know how a normal person would give clues of their mood, and he could never read my clues. And for a long time, I misinterpreted that. And the other thing that was really funny, now I understand it, but I didn't at first. I actually, after about a year of being married, I sent him to have his hearing checked. I was convinced that he had a hearing problem because so often he would say, "Excuse me," or "Pardon me." He didn't hear what I said. And I thought, my goodness, he must have a severe hearing problem because I'm always having to repeat myself. Well, so he went to have his ears checked. There was absolutely nothing wrong with his hearing. And I thought, what is that about? So it took years to figure out. I mean, I just adapted to it. It irritated me to some extent, but I adapted to it. And we found out that in his audio processing, it takes him 5 or 6
words before I know what somebody's saying.
Yeah, and then he tunes in. So I think it was reading Temple Grandin's Q&A booklet that gave us that clue.
Yeah.
And have you had that?
No, I haven't. But Kevin, I can say you asked about how things were with our relationship and such. Allie and I have been communicating for over a month on the internet and hadn't got to meet in person, so that kind of changes our dynamic a little bit. And so when I drove to Atlanta from Charlotte first time here, we'd had all this physical expectation coming, and so we did kiss on our first date together. And I probably agree with Dr. Ross. I mean, if I had a hard time learning anything about it, I didn't seem to think I needed to learn too much more, but there was no hesitancy to keep giving further lessons just in case, I mean, let's face it, Dr. Ross, it's one of the best topics to study, isn't it?
Well, I've learned a lot about myself since being on the spectrum because, I mean, all the years I was growing up, I knew I had handicaps, and everybody else around me seemed to be able to get through them, and it was just such a hard thing for me to do. And then I remember in the early years of our marriage really wanting to find some way I could emotionally connect better with Kathy, but it's like everything I was trying just wasn't working. And so everything else I do, I managed to make progress. Why am I not making progress here? But then when our therapist friend said, you need to take these tests, I took the test and says, this is why I've been failing, and I need to change what I'm doing. And so we've had a lot more success since then because now I'm trying to overcome these handicaps in ways that actually work, rather than doing things that were doomed to fail. So, and my sons noticed too, because my sons just thought, well, I remember I was particularly hurt by the fact that our older boy thought I didn't like him. And it's like,
I thought you were always mad at him.
Thought I was always mad at him because I wasn't emotionally expressive with my face. It was just flat all the time. And, that really concerned me. I really wanted to be able to connect with him. But, now that our sons are in their 20s, it's a lot better. And I tell people, hey, if you're a parent with a child that's on the spectrum, your relationship will be great when they're 1 year old.
Babies, yeah.
Babies. I mean, that's fine because babies just throw their emotions out there. It's not going to be so hard to read them. But, when they get to be about 8, 9, 10, especially the teenage years, those are going to be the difficult years. But wait till they hit their 20s. You're going to see things really come back. And I've noticed that with, parents who are on the spectrum. Just being patient, realizing it will work out. Just keep loving your children. They won't realize it when they're in their teenage years, but there will come a time when they'll be grateful for everything you've been able to do for them.
So how did the proposal come about? Did you pop the question, Hugh, or what?
I popped the question, and I realized, look, I'm just not going to be able to make this thing work with Kathy meeting my parents. So we kept having these phone calls, and I basically talked to my parents, told them I was really serious about Kathy. I wound up having another private meeting with her parents, with Kathy not there, and told them that I was interested in pursuing this relationship to marriage. So I got their permission to propose to Kathy. And my parents said, yeah, don't wait until we have a private meeting. You got our consent. We like Kathy. We've never met her, but all of our phone conversations have been good. The fact that you got a green light from her parents, stop delaying. Just go ahead. And so that's when I popped the question. I had Kathy over for dinner, and I kind of got the green light a few days before Valentine's Day, and I said, "Oh, that would be really corny to do it on Valentine's Day. I'm not going to do that. Everybody I know does that. That's just too corny." So I purposely waited till 6 days after Valentine's Day.
Meanwhile, Christmas came and went, New Year's came and went, Valentine's Day came and went, and I thought, I don't know if he's ever going to pop the question. I'm not even sure he's thinking marriage. So I was like very confused at that point. So here it was, President's Day. In spite of the fact that I was explaining to you why I was waiting. I mean, you weren't explaining why. You just said, "Hey, we can't go to Canada." The Canada trip didn't work out because you.
Well, I'll let you know I was talking to your parents.
No, you didn't.
I didn't? Oh, I did.
You didn't tell me that.
Okay.
I didn't. He was doing all this stuff in private and secret, so I was clueless. But I guess it was President's Day. It was. We got together for dinner on our typical night. We were just sitting there. We had dinner, and we were sitting on the couch talking, and he just, out of the blue, turned to me and he asked me if I would do him the honor of being his wife. And I was like, well, yes. and it was just like, okay. It was just no big romantic setup or anything. It was just your typical meal together that we had many times, and it was just kind of comical, but it was fun. We then drove to my parents' house and met with them and said, hey, he asked, and I said yes.
And finally, my visa issues got settled. I had an H-1 visa, and so that's when we're actually able to go to Canada.
At Easter time, we were able to go to Canada and meet your parents.
And that was a bit scary for you, I remember.
Oh, Nick, that was definitely, because, he's the number one son, the only son in the family, the oldest, their pride and joy. And I knew they wanted him to marry a Canadian girl so that he would live near them. And here he is proposing marriage to this American. In fact, they called me a Yank. Even though I'm in California, right? To me, a Yank is a New Yorker, but no, to them, it's any American. And so we arrive in Vancouver. We get a taxi from the airport to his parents' house. As we drive up to his parents' house, his mother, his father, his aunt, his uncle, his sister, his brother-in-law, his other sister, cousins, they were all lined up on the front porch as our taxi drove up. Oh my goodness, I was so intimidated. But, at any rate, I just thought, well, I'm just going to smile and hope they approve.
I'd like to remind everyone at this point you're listening to a Deeper Waters podcast. We got Hugh and Kathy Ross here talking about Asperger's and marriage. But if you're here next week, we're going to have Ted Wright on talking about archaeology and how it relates to the Bible, especially the Old Testament. Topics like the Exodus, the Conquest. Is there any archaeological evidence that these events happen? So if you're interested in archaeology, come back next week to join us with Ted Wright here. But for now, let's get back to Hugh and Kathy. Now, Kathy, I can tell you on my end, though, I mean, things move quick for us, and I'm pretty much I tell my parents, this is what I plan on doing, and I'm doing it. And I do. I mean, when I decided it was time for me to move into an apartment, we kind of discussed it out when I came home one day and said, hey, I just put down some money on an apartment. And that was it. And then I just called and said, yeah, I'm going to propose to Allie, okay? And I don't think I care about being corny because I proposed on Christmas Eve. And
I would have loved that, Nick. Frankly, I would have loved that. But he, I guess, did not think that was good.
Well, yeah, it's quite amusing because Allie and I would sometimes talk on AOL Instant Messenger back in those days and such.
Yes.
And she was messaging me one day, and I was on the phone with her parents at the same time, and she was kind of in the mindset of saying, I just don't know if you're ever going to propose to me or not. And I was on the phone with her parents getting the blessing for my proposal to them. So I was like, guys, I was like, if you can, seriously, guys, before you propose, I do always consider it good form. Get the blessing of the parents first.
Right.
Absolutely, Nick. Absolutely. But I'm cracking up to realize that Allie had the same question in her mind that I had in mind. It's like, what's happening here? He's not getting around to the question. So it's like, are you going to do this? But I was not as bold as Allie to actually speak up and ask.
Kathy, you gotta talk to my wife sometime and hear about some of the dating stories and such. You would absolutely love it. So you get married, and what's it like, especially for you, Dr. Ross, on the spectrum, getting used to married life? Because now you have to be close to someone so much. I mean, you even have to share the same bed with someone. I mean, it's just a huge thing to get used to.
It wasn't difficult because, we had known one another for so 2 years before we even dated.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of,
can you
the relationship was already
again? We had the same thing happen again. I don't know what's going on today.
Okay. No, it wasn't that difficult for me, Nick, because we had such a long relationship with one another, more than 2 years as friends and as ministry partners.
Almost 3.
And then we were dating, and we dated for a year and a month before we got married. And during the whole dating process, we maintained our ministry partnership. And I remember we got married in the church. Everybody saw this as a union of 2 ministries, and 2 sets of families and 2 churches, for that matter. So, I knew I could trust Kathy, so there wasn't any confusion in that area. I mean, I was very confident in the fact that she loved me, and I knew that she knew that I loved her. Although after we were married, there were times I'm wondering, gee, am I really expressing to Kathy in ways that make sense to her that I really care and love her? Because there'd be times when she'd say, hey, what's going on here? And again, it was just not knowing what's happening with people on the spectrum. There were times of confusion, but I think, I think what helped too is we had a good honeymoon before we settled in.
Yeah.
And there was
almost 4 weeks.
Yeah, because we came back for a honeymoon. There was we were teaching at a college briefing conference, and they gave us a cabin we spent time in. So
where'd you go on your honeymoon?
Well, we spent the first couple of weeks in Hawaii.
Nice.
And then we spent another week up in the Sierras. My uncle owned a big, beautiful cabin up in the Sonora Pass area. So we spent a week there. So that was 3 weeks. And then after that, we had this week at College Briefing Conference where we had a little cabin to ourselves there. So it was during the summer. I didn't have to go back to teaching until after that. So we had a good 4 weeks or more to really adjust to married life, to having no other responsibilities except to spend time with each other. And I think that was really
But the
really
biggest
helpful.
adjustment I remember was like in the first week of our marriage. That's when I learned, okay, I need to change the way I'm communicating with you. Because there were a couple of times when there was a big misunderstanding.
Well, yes. I mean, we would be intimate, and then your conversation would immediately switch to politics or and I would be like, what? Or your emotions, I'd be very emotionally sensitive.
Yeah, he kind of killed the mood, didn't he?
Yeah, it was like, what? So that was a bit hurtful. And then I was like, what have I gotten myself into?
Oh, that is just so funny to hear about. I mean, I've never heard the case of talking about politics after intimacy. That's a new one. Yeah, but I'm guessing also.
Or astrophysics, yes.
Yeah.
No, something so. You get the idea.
Yeah, I could understand saying something's out of this world, but I don't think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. No, it's very different.
Now, Kathy, on the spectrum, many of us tend to be obsessive with our interests and such. Do you think that Dr. Oz can be obsessive with his interest with you sometimes too?
In this case, I would say no. He was not obsessive with interest in me. So I think, again, he had such an obsessive interest in his studies that I think that probably made me sometimes feel a little second fiddle.
Yeah, but I think you were surprised at how much I would prepare for our vacation adventures. Especially when we go up into the Canadian mountains. It's like, look at all the stuff that you're getting together and how you're planning this in detail. And so I think that surprised you. But yeah, I wanted to make sure everything was... And I also realized that you're much bigger of an adventurer than I am, so I began to worry about that you might get hurt. So, because...
I'm a risk taker when it comes to hiking and climbing and whatever, and Hugh was always worried that I was getting too close to the edge or taking too many risks, and that surprised me. I think that one of the big adjustments was that I'm very flexible, adaptable. I don't have a strict routine. Hugh is very routine. That was very strange to me, and it was hard to adapt to that, I think. Just your pattern of living is very much the same from day to day to day, except you have to travel a lot. You have to learn to be adaptable. But anyway, I think
it threw you just the discipline. I mean, the fact that, okay, these are the 40 minutes in which I'm going to do physical exercise. And it's like, I got to do it every day, and it's got to be at a certain time, and it's got to be at a certain intensity. And so I think that kind of threw you. So, and also just the way I did my studies.
The other thing that was really funny is that sometimes he wasn't reading his own feelings. He would become anxious about something, and he wasn't aware that he was anxious. And so I would carry his anxiety within me, or he would be very stressed, I guess, about something, and he wasn't aware of his own stress, and I would end up carrying his stress. And so it took me a while to realize, we need to talk about this, that, Hugh, you need to acknowledge when you're feeling stressed. The other thing that would happen is that I would become very critical of him. I mean, really critical and picking away, and then he realized that when I was doing that, I was actually going through a time of being very critical of myself and being unaware of my self-criticism. I would sort of take it out on him. So, we've had a lot of learning to do about how we respond to each other, and so it's been. I just find it fascinating, Nick, and I think you and your wife Allie probably do too. That being married to somebody who's really different from you. And it's interesting. It's not boring. We're always having to try to figure out what's going on, and we both love to learn, and we both are interested in what makes people tick. Before I was an English major, I was a psychology major, and this is comical too, is that our son is a neuropsychologist, or he's in training to be a neuropsychologist, and his wife, new bride, is also a licensed professional counselor, or she's getting certified to be one. They both knew before, I think, Hugh did, just what it meant for him to be on the spectrum. It's like, I think they even identified you as being Asperger's before you knew for sure.
Well, even before our therapist friend figured it out, David had a girlfriend before.
Oh, yes, the girl he dated.
And she was the one who said, I think your dad's on the spectrum. Because she had studied that.
She told David that, but he didn't tell us.
He didn't tell us, no.
Yeah. That was pretty...
Now, Kathy, I'm curious also, did you marry a romantic?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
yes.
I heard Dr. Ross about, preparing for all your adventures and trips and things like that, and I know that when it comes to Valentine's Day, anniversary, and her birthday, I'm usually going all out planning everything I can because I want everything to be just excellent.
Well, I think Hugh is probably more romantic than I am. He remembers dates and he writes very beautiful messages. Like, I never get a card from Hugh that's just signed, or that's just a funny, little comical card. Or if he does get me a funny card, he also gets me a very serious romantic card and writes a note on it. And this is one of the challenges, though, Nick. I don't know how you do.
Okay.
For me.
Kathy, can you repeat about what one of the
hardest time? Oh, yes. One of the big challenges with Hugh is that he has a very hard time discerning what I really like and what to get for me. And so he for a long time tried to just think about what his mom liked and what kinds of things his dad would give to his mom. And so her taste was very different from mine, and her interest very different from mine. So he would get something and think, this is going to be great, but it would be something that was not to my taste, or it wasn't something I really wanted. And I felt terrible because he would be so disappointed to know that he tried so hard, but he missed the mark by a mile. So after a while, he just started saying, what would you like? And then I will,
Well, I learned that I can't buy her jewelry. I can't buy her clothes. I mean, even when I go to like exotic places, I remember coming back from going through New Zealand on one of my ministry trips, and they had this incredible exotic jewelry that you can't get anywhere else in the world. Beautiful blue color. And I says, I'll get Kathy some earrings. Well, she looked at him and said, nah, it's not my taste.
Now, mind you, I do like clothes and jewelry, but the style issue is where we went off, where he got off. Because his mom had a very different taste in the style of jewelry.
So now I just asked her, I'd like to get you some jewelry or some clothes. Mm-hmm. But you come with me and we'll pick it out.
Yeah.
Because I realize
that works much better for us.
Yeah. You talk about writing, how he writes messages. I mean, you and I have been Facebook friends for a while. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I don't post on Facebook on Sundays, but every other day, I post a love message to Ari every single day, along with a marriage meme. I've had some wives, my husband hates you right now because you're always going on and on, and such. And when it comes to gifts for her, it's usually pretty easy because I just remember she mentioned seeing something at a store, something that she really, really want, and I'll make a mental note of it. And sometimes what she'll say, we don't have the money here, but I don't tell her, but I do have money in Amazon credit because I do things, get gift cards and such. And she really likes Pokemon, and so she saw this one at a store once that she wanted, and there's 9 different forms of this one. And she looked, and she was so eager. I said, honey, we don't have the money with us right now. We can't do this. And she was so disappointed. I went home, got straight on Amazon, and ordered her a thing that had, they were all small, but it had all 9 of them in it. And that shows up at the door about a week or so later. So I always learn now that if she needs to be very careful sometimes about saying what kind of things she wants around me, because I will go out and not too long ago, she posted this picture of this, the lamp, the rose thing from Beauty and the Beast, but there's a lamp version of it, and so it'd be so good to have this. I look on Amazon immediately and think, how much does this cost? Okay. Or going up the game store and she saw a video game she wanted to play and said, I don't know if it's on the PlayStation, which is what we have. And I get on my phone while we're walking around because we're at the mall, and I see digital code. Talk to one of my friends, my former roommate. Hey, what does this digital code thing mean? Well, it means you can go and purchase it, and you can upload it directly to your game system there. It's just like you bought the game. Okay, thanks. Get home, purchase it, have enough Amazon credit, load it up. Here you go, baby.
Nick, you don't realize this, but you're very unusual. And right now, Hugh is probably wishing he had not agreed to be on this podcast because he does not have this capacity that you obviously have to make mental note of what your wife really likes.
Mental notes is not my thing. Moreover,
we should tell him about your trips to the grocery store.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, I really like to give Kathy surprise gifts. But she's told me over and over again, don't surprise me, don't surprise me. We need to talk over first. But after 40 years of marriage, I finally succeeded in a surprise gift. It took 40 years. But just a couple of weeks ago, it actually happened. I said, you know what? I've been frustrated all these years trying to surprise her with a gift. None of it's worked. She's told me never to do it. But I got to give it one more shot before I completely give up. So
it's the moon, the floating moon.
What I did, I had to order it from Britain. And it took, 5 weeks to get here? But it's a moon, and it's an exact replica. I mean, it's accurate in terms of the craters and the mountains on the moon. But it's got a magnet in the back, and it's got a base where it actually floats in midair, rotates, and changes colors as it's got a light inside. And said, well, I mean, at the worst case scenario, this will be a night light. I figure, that's the worst that can happen. But maybe she'll really like it. Who knows? So
I love it.
Turns out she loves it.
He scored on that one. But honestly, I don't trust him, because when we were all through the years of our marriage, he would be so kind. I mean, this was nice. He would be kind enough to do a grocery run for me. If I was making a meal and it's like, oh man, to do this, I need some more squash, and I need an onion, and I need this and that, or something. And he would go to the store and come home with a very different list, because this was on sale. I got this. Look, it was on sale. And I'm like, well, where's what I asked for? Well, they didn't. It wasn't good quality, so I got this other thing instead, or I thought this was better. And so I would be so frustrated, because he had a whole different, he would make substitutions for the list. So now we have a pact where he'll ask me before he goes out the door, are there any substitutions on this?
I've also learned to take my cell phone with me.
Yes.
Because if I'm going to alter the grocery
Thank God
list,
for cell phones.
I get permission first.
I'd like to remind everyone at this point you're listening to Deeper Waters podcast, and everything we do here is through the support of listeners like Hugh. And if you want to support us, go to deeperwatersapologetics.com, and there you'll see a link, help support the work of Deeper Waters Christian Ministries. There's a link in there. You click it, you get taken to Risen Jesus. It's the ministry of my in-laws, Mike and Debbie Lacona. You make your donation, then you get in touch with me or Ari or Mike or Debbie and say, hey, I made a donation. I want to go to Nick Peters. I want to go to Deeper Waters. We will get that donation. It will be tax deductible. You can also buy books that I've either written or co-written. Defining Inerrancy, A Creed for the Ages, The Apostles' Creed in Today's Christian, Groundless, God and Natural Disasters, things like that. Or you can go and you can buy jewelry, actually, through us. And we have a lady who runs a premier store, and whatever you purchase, 25% of that goes to Deeper Waters. You just get in touch with me if you want details on how to do that. And guys, like I always tell you, you can buy something special for that lady in your life to make up for that big screw-up that you recently did with her. Or you can buy something special for that lady in your life to make up that big screw-up that I know you're going to make with her. And guys, also keep in mind, it doesn't have to just be your wife or girlfriend. Mother's Day is coming up. Mothers like that stuff too. And if you can't do any of these things, please go on iTunes and leave a positive review of the Deeper Waters podcast. I'd love to see them. Now, Dr. Ross and Mrs. Ross, do you have an organization you'd like to see people donate to?
Well, we're the founders of Reasons to Believe. We founded that organization nearly 33 years ago. The website's reasons.org. That's where you can get all kinds of science-faith material to help in your evangelism. And hey, during this month, if you go to reasons.org/cc, you'll get a free chapter of a book we just released a month ago, The Creator and the Cosmos. It's a chapter where I discuss Stephen Hawking, his research, and the philosophical implications of his research.
The theological implications.
Theological implications.
I'm guessing it was probably a bit hard when you heard that he'd passed away.
Yes.
It did. I age contact. What struck me is that he had a mischievous streak in him, so I wrote about that, and people really liked it, and so I said, hey, I'm going to give away this chapter, because that's where I write about how, even though he wasn't a Christian, his research substantially strengthened the case for the Christian concept of Christian teaching on cosmology.
Well, I'd like to say something else back to the surprises thing and such, because I think one of the benefits of being on the spectrum is we don't always express things very well. Sometimes that is a benefit, because I can be totally tricking Ari or something and be as straight-faced as possible the whole time. She does not know how I do it. but her 21st birthday came on a Sunday, and I told her, I'm sorry, we don't have a lot of money. There's nothing we can really do. But like your friend, she wants you to meet at the mall and just go shopping with you, okay? And she said she'll meet you at the church office, because our church met at the mall. We had a store at the mall as well that was our office area and such. And so we'll just go there that evening. And she was so depressed all day long. She couldn't get to do anything for her birthday. And we got there, and she comes around, and right there in the office is all her friends and such from the church waiting there for a surprise birthday party for her. And I'd even had people make video messages for her who couldn't be there, like her parents, the Habermasses, and others, wishing her a happy birthday. Everyone in the church knew about this except for her. And her dad even said later on, yeah, so you can say, you know what, you had 2 parties that day. You had the pity party you threw for yourself all day, and the birthday party that you got to enjoy. So I think ever since then she's learned, do not ever question my husband on this kind of thing, because he does not forget these things, and he will have a surprise for me.
That's a great story, Nick. That's a great story.
Now, you talked about how you've had some misunderstandings and such when you got started, because looking at you two, I see a very happy couple together and such. But what happens when storm clouds show up? I mean, I'm sure they do sometimes. How do you all handle disagreements and arguments and such?
Well, our sons always say, Mom, Dad, do you guys ever fight? We never see you fighting. And we said, well, we do fight, but we fight over theology.
No, Hugh stays very calm, which helps. When we have disagreements, he's able to stay very calm while I get more emotional. But we usually, probably the hardest thing is that it takes him so long to figure out that I'm upset about something.
Less than 2 days.
About 2 days.
About 2 days.
So, because my clue, but I keep having to remind myself that he's not reading my clues, and I have to be very direct. Mm-hmm. And then I have to let him know that I need to talk, and that I need for him to just listen. I remember having to tell him, I need you this is probably just typical male-female stuff, but I had to tell him, just listen while don't fix it, just listen, and I'm feeling. I think the biggest challenge is that Hugh has difficulty with empathy, especially since I tend to get down. And I have ever since I was a child, I struggled to some extent with depressive tendencies. And Hugh never, ever got depressed, I don't think, in his life. I don't think he knows what that feeling is. So for him to try to show empathy when I was feeling depressed or down about something or discouraged was really hard. And so there have been times when I just felt super disappointed about something, and he wouldn't feel that same level, or didn't even understand how that could be so disappointing. I remember that was really tough. So what I learned to do was to create maybe some word pictures to try to connect with a time in his life that somehow resembled, what I was experiencing, so that he could kind of get an idea from me as to what that felt like. Mm-hmm. Do you remember when you were giving this presentation and someone said you were, totally misunderstood it and thought you were undermining confidence in the Word of God? Do you remember how that stung? Or do you remember how it felt when your parents said this and you were trying to do that? And so if I could come up with analogies to try to help him feel what I was feeling, it would be helpful. But I'm not always really good at doing that.
I've also been explaining to her, it's not that I don't have empathy. There's a huge time lag on it. You need to give me time to be able to express what you're wanting me to express. And I've told other people on the spectrum too, you need to let people know it's not that you don't have emotions, is that they're delayed. Now that really helps when I'm doing a debate, because I don't realize till 2 hours after the debate is over that I've been insulted. But I'll tell you, 2 hours after the debate, I'm really feeling the emotional hurt of what happened. I just don't feel it right there. And likewise, when Kathy's expressing these emotions, it takes me a couple of hours to be able to process what I'm hearing and seeing.
You're like deer in the headlights.
And then when I do come across and figure it out and express it, it's like, Hugh, it's too late. It's like, but I can tell you this, every year we've been married, it's gotten better.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been real progress with every single year. In fact, I often tell couples, because some, as a pastor as well as an astronomer, I get to officiate marriages. And so if you really have your marriage on a solid spiritual footing, your first year of marriage will be the worst year of your marriage life. It's going to get better and better and better from that point onward. And yet typically the first year is a good year, but just to encourage a couple, hey, if you're on this spiritual footing where you make God part of your marriage, it literally will get better every single year. And that's what I think is so exciting about being a Christian. Our bodies may be decaying as we age, but spiritually there's this blessing, and it's a thrill to get old. I mean, every year it gets better. And it's like, I can't wait till we graduate from this life and go on to the next life.
I'm not so thrilled as you are about getting old, but I hear what you're saying. I do agree.
Well, Dr. Ross, how many years has it been?
It's been 40 years that we've been married.
Wow, as impressive.
40. And you and Allie are just in the early stages, as I gather. I mean, I don't know exactly how old you are.
Well, I am now 37, and she is 27, so yes, I robbed that crater big time.
Yeah, you guys are so young.
This July, we will celebrate 8 years together. And
Congratulations.
I remember recently riding with someone because I had a flat tire, and so I had to call AAA and have someone come and tell me to automotive place, and we started about marriage some way because he mentioned having a fiance. So I decided to say, you're going to be getting married, and because marriage is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And he said, how long have you all been married? He said, we've been married nearly 8 years. I said, wow, that's a long time. And I'm going, I kind of appreciate the compliment, but it's kind of sad when you tell me that being married for nearly 8 years is a long time.
Yeah, to us, that's just in the beginning. You're just in the early stages.
But you know what's sad is 8 years is above the American average for the marriage. That's what's sad.
Now, you all do have kids. Has there been any concern about any of the kids being on the spectrum or anything like that?
No, neither one of them. Far from it.
Well, they're not on the spectrum, but our older son had a traumatic birth, and he definitely had neuromotor challenges and other challenges. He's very, very different, and he's not on the spectrum, but he's had struggles.
One thing he shares in common with me, when I was a child, I had problems controlling certain muscles. I'm not at all athletic. In fact, I was last chosen for a sports team. I almost failed grade 1 because I couldn't hold a pencil. I couldn't prove that I understood the reading and the math. And I saw this in our older son, too, is that he had muscle issues growing up. It took him a while before he really was able to.
Yeah, the odd thing there is he had great fine motor skills.
Yeah.
Therapy.
Yeah, I could never.
Do you have issues with
motor skills?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you have a back issue too.
Yeah. When I was in school and going through physical education, I remember that I could never do the sit and reach test, for instance. Oh. And if I had to, we had to call someone down there who could hold my knees down because I could not keep my knees straight. And even after we did that, it'd be about 6 or 8 inches. And again, I was horrible at most every single sport I played, except Possibly because I'm so small and tiny, I could do dodgeball pretty well. Not throwing, but I could have 3 or 4 people trying to hit me. I could just weave every single way that I needed to, and it'd take a concentrated effort just to take me down. And that was about the only thing I could do, I'd say.
Way to go, Nick.
Yeah.
Playing to strengths. That's what you do.
Yeah, but for my motor skills, I'm not really the best with my hands. I'd say the most I use them is playing video games and things like that and sorts. And I'd say, for me, the main hurdle that Allie and I have to deal with me especially is when it comes to my diet. I mean, I noticed Dr. Ross doesn't seem to have any of these problems. I mean, talk about fixing Korean chicken livers or whatever and such. I probably would have panicked at that point if that had happened to me. But I have a very restrictive diet, and I only eat foods that I can eat with my hands right now, and that's something Allie's working with me on. We did have a case not too long ago. It was a Christmas party with our church, and the small group leader, where Allie had asked me, Nick, please stop sitting there in the corner reading your book. Get up here and socialize some. Have a snack. I said, Fine. Just, I don't know why you want me to do this. I'm sitting here. I'm happy with my book. Thank you, but okay. And I get up and I start having something, and the lady, Indy, who's hosting the party, and she's a great lady. We get along great now, and such we always have, but this time she makes a mistake. She sees me out and she says, oh, Nick, you're eating something. I'm so happy. And she runs straight up to me and is so happy, and I freeze immediately. And Allie is laughing some for a little bit, and then she stops and says, wait. This isn't a joke going on. This is something else. And she can tell immediately. She explains that he's very self-conscious when it comes to eating. I can eat in front of other people. I'm very self-conscious if someone makes a big deal about it. And it took me a while just to be able to eat in front of other people. And I can tell you, for the rest of that evening, I was pretty much miserable. Just playing the whole thing over and over and having to be there and lean on Allie the whole time and such, and kind of thinking, I kind of wish we could just go straight home right now. So that's kind of what it's like for us.
Wow. Well, the thing that's interesting about Hugh's diet is just so different. I actually don't do a lot of cooking for the two of us. I used to do more than I do now, but Hugh has certain foods that he likes, and he eats for I'd say he eats with his brain and not with his taste buds, because his brain tells him this is good for you, like eat raw kale, it's good for you, eat lentils, it's good. So he eats according to what is nutritious for him, and he actually enjoys foods that nobody else enjoys. And he will not eat butter or sauce or salad dressing. He eats even a baked potato. He'll eat it with maybe some chives, but he'll eat it just straight up with no butter or a sauce of any kind. And his meat, like if I'm having salmon, I like to have some sauce with it or whatever. He does not want ever any sauce or anything creamy or whatever, and no butter. And so he has his own foods that he eats, and those are the foods he likes. And the food that the rest of the world enjoys is, he doesn't like it. So it is kind of peculiar. And when we go places, I always try to, like, if the cook, whoever's cooking or providing food, if they ask if Hugh has any food allergy, often people ask you now that if you have any food allergies, and I'll just say, no food allergies in particular, but Hugh especially likes vegetables and fruit and no sauce. So it's a way for us to get something for him to eat that he can eat and enjoy. But
well, I remember talking to these people, because I was engaging a lot of these people who are on the spectrum, and they said, we noticed that you're all slim. How do you explain that? And I said, well, we don't eat for taste. Again, that's our brains. Okay, what's good for my body? What's healthy? What's nutritious? I'll eat that. And, you don't overeat. So it's like, yeah, almost everybody I know is on the spectrum, has
Slim.
They're slim, but it's because they're not like normal people in the way they eat.
Well,
Yeah.
I can't say I'm one who prefers healthy eating. It's just I've always been restricted, but I just don't eat a lot. And to my wife, I'm a never-ending mystery because, like, how is it that you eat so little, but you seem to constantly be full of energy? You can just do anything and go anywhere and such. But for me, most of my oddities are around food, because if Allie gets done eating something and she's got like a plate or a paper plate there and she wants me to take it to the kitchen for her, and it's got a single crumb on there, just a single crumb, I will carry it like it's biohazard waste. I can't even look and such. And we go to Celebrate Recovery on Tuesday nights, and if they have food in there that I think is messy, there's a main eating room before the fellowship hall where everyone goes for the service and things like that and such. If that's in there, I can't go in really, because I just get grossed out immediately, and I feel so much mental pressure and such that I'm staying outside. Okay, I mean, I once said me recently said, "Why aren't you going in there?" I said, "The food's messy." So, oh, okay. She is the only person who I think would have understood what I meant by that.
Yes. Yes, and I do recall, this is one of the things I recalled when we were later figuring out about Hugh being on the spectrum. I remembered a story that his mom told me once about when Hugh was a baby and then a toddler, how he could not handle having his food
Mixed together.
touch. It's like if there were 2 different or 3 different kinds of food on the plate, they had to be discrete. They had to be separate. If they touched or mixed, he just cried and cried and cried. And even though he was very hungry, because he has a very high metabolism, he would not eat it. In fact, I think he went without food a couple of days once when he was little, because she was trying to break him of this, what she considered to be some kind of stubbornness, and it didn't work. So she basically made sure that his food stayed separate on the plate. And even now, when he'll eat a meal, I'll look over and think, how peculiar. He's eating. I like to take a bite of this and a bite of that and a bite of this. If there are 3 different food items on my plate, I actually enjoy. You would have a hard time, Nick, because I enjoy mixing them up. Whereas Hugh will eat all of this particular food item first, and then he will eat all of this other food item second, and then all of this other one. That he doesn't mix them together. And so it's still a very distinct way. I think it's not that it's the same for each person on the spectrum, but I think each person on the spectrum has his own food issues.
Food peculiarities.
That your specific, relationship with eating and food and how it looks and how it's presented and the texture of it and the quantity of it.
Well, like our staff always jokes when we have a staff meal together that Hugh eats the decoration.
Yeah.
So
We'll eat the part.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever had the issue with foods touching each other. That's because I usually only have one thing, period, when I have a meal, so it's not a problem.
Thing at a time, because that's obviously very strong reaction for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, well, we're all very different on the spectrum and such. And, more you keep talking about this, I can't but wonder if you have ever seen the show Monk before.
Yes.
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 Because I honestly consider that if I was the monk figure, which a lot of people can think of me as, Allie is my Natalie or Sharona, whatever it is. Do you always see that same dynamic going on with you two?
We totally relate to that, Nick. Totally relate to that. Oh, that's so funny that you like that show, because I have often told Hugh that being on the spectrum is a little like being OCD.
Well, I remember my parents thought I was OCD because all I would do is study astronomy and physics. In fact, it got so frustrating for them, they eventually bought our family a book on evolutionary biology because they wanted to break me of this habit of only studying astronomy and physics. And I was the only one in the family that read the book they bought. So I remember telling them, Mom, Dad, the numbers don't add up. There's always speciation before humanity and none afterwards. And I tell people it was 6 years later when I picked up a Bible for the first time, it answered that issue, why there's all this speciation before and none afterwards. So yeah, being OCD about astronomy and physics, it also actually helped me when I first picked up the Bible.
I'm kind of curious also, since you said you watched Monk, since you're so on the spectrum and being very intellectually gifted, did you have cases many times where you would solve the case before Monk did, or what?
Yeah, there were times I figured it out. So
I would ask you, Nick, how do you, you're a romantic, obviously, and when you see movies together with Allie, do you experience an emotional reaction? I'm asking because I found it so interesting. We don't go to theater very often at all. It's too expensive and the shows are usually terrible. But a few times we would go to a movie, and I do remember especially seeing the movie about Temple Grandin. And then there was another one, was it called The Secret Garden? Anyway, at the end of the film, Hugh would be in tears. Tears would be running down his face. And I figured out that he would react emotionally to a movie much more deeply in many cases than I would. And I was always a little nonplussed by that. I thought, that is so interesting. And I just wondered if you ever had that experience where you reacted to a movie that you watched or a program that you watched and it just really hit you emotionally and brought you to tears.
Yeah, one case I can definitely remember was when I was in college. Smallville was my favorite show on TV at the time. Young Clark Kent growing up. I'm not sure if you ever saw it, but it was my favorite.
Yes.
And when they have a 100th episode, is that there was going to be a major death on the show. It seems like an odd way to celebrate your 100th episode, but that's what was going to happen. And my dad and I watched this one together. We watched the whole show together religiously, and we even have a joke that my grandmother lived next door to us at the time, and she called us once, and my mom answered her phone, and she said, they can't talk to you right now. They're having their time together watching their show. And she said, well, tell them I'm having a heart attack. And our response was, yeah, call her an ambulance. We'll be there after the show's over, okay? But when this 100th episode came, it had that Clark Kent's dad, Jonathan Kent, died in the end. And to me, Jonathan Kent was kind of one of the greatest dads ever on television. And I was so sad when I saw him die on there. And I went to bed that night. I was going in my room before going to bed, and Mom came up and said, are you going to be okay? And I said, yeah, I'm going to be okay. But I honestly didn't know at that point. Because, I mean, I went to bed and I think, I don't know if I am going to be okay. I mean, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it. I mean, the next day I woke up and I was fine. I was able to go about the day and such. But yeah, I get really caught up in TV shows and things like that. If I start watching them, it's just, it's easy for me to get drawn into the world.
Yeah. And so you obviously had a very strong emotional reaction, a very sad. For Hugh, it's anything that involves reconciliation, where a broken relationship becomes resolved in some way, and that always brings him to tears, whatever it is. And it's just, I mean, I've had enough time. Obviously, I've been married for 40 years to finally figure out the pattern is what brings him to tears at the end of a film or a TV show or whatever, and it's reconciliation. It's always for him, reconciliation, and for you, it was the death of someone that you looked up to and thought was, lost. It was the loss that brought you to tears, and for him, it's somehow this reconciliation thing. But yeah, it's really a strong reaction. It's more than the typical reaction for.
Yeah, well, for me, it sounds egotistical to say in some ways, but I saw a lot of myself in Clark Kent in there, because Clark, growing up, you never consider a Superman growing up, but he was an outsider to everyone. That he couldn't do sports, for instance, normally. Not for the same reason someone like Dr. Ross and I can't do them, but because, you tackle someone on the field, you can kill them. That kind of thing and such. He had an unfair advantage. He couldn't do all these clubs, anything like that. He was a dork growing up in school, as it were. And yet, he was always one to go about and try and be the hero and do the right thing. And yes, always had trouble with the girl of his dreams. Constantly, I thought, this guy, I relate to Superman growing up. And so when I saw him go through the loss of someone like that who was such an awesome dad, I think that hit even harder and such.
That's so interesting, because for Hugh, seeing Temple Grandin, the movie, what got to him was the connection with his mom. He felt like Temple did, like this odd child whose relatives and people around said, she needs to be institutionalized. And it was her mom that stood up for her and always worked to protect her and to let her be herself. And Hugh remembers that when he was little, his parents' friends would say, that kid is retarded, he needs to be institutionalized, or, and he was made fun of at school, but he remembered that his mom always stood up for him, always believed in him, always was an ally for him. And so when he saw that same example in the Temple Grandin film, like you, he just really connected with that emotionally. It meant so, it was deep.
Yeah, it made me realize how much I owed to my parents, that everybody in their life was saying, Hugh's mentally retarded, he needs to be institutionalized. Why do you still have him in the home here? Why are you trying to send him to a regular school? And how they just resolutely said, no, we're going to raise him like a normal child. And we know he's not mentally retarded. He's not talking, but look, he's doing science experiments here. So they protected me. They protected me. They believed in me. When I saw that in Temple Grandin's mother, it just made me incredibly grateful for my parents.
Yeah, and cried for half an hour straight. Couldn't talk.
Dr. Ross, we are getting near the end, so let me ask this. Exactly how essential is Kathy to what you're doing today?
She's critical in the sense I wouldn't be able to communicate with people and audiences if it wasn't for Kathy being patient and training me on how to relate to people, how to talk to them, how to look at them, how to dress properly. And even, I'm still trying to figure this out. And so she watches my stage presence when I'm up in front of a crowd and says, Hugh, you need to get away from your computer. And I said, well, I need that computer to figure out where I am in my talk. And so I've learned, I can make the images on my slides so big that I can see them from 12 feet away, so that I can actually walk out and try to engage people. And people have noticed. They've noticed how much I've improved over the years.
Yeah, and with Allie and I should always say, you were doing apologetics long before I came along and such. I said, well, yeah, hon, I was, but when you came into my life, and definitely when you married me, everything got upped exponentially and such. My confidence level started going straight through the roof at that point and such. And it's all because you're in my life now, and that makes all the difference. I mean, losing Allie would be the worst nightmare I can think of in ministry.
Yeah, I understand that. I also really appreciate the fact that, when I'm speaking to people, when people meet my wife, number one, they're shocked that I was able to attract such a woman into my life. But the fact that they like her so much and they love to engage her, it just makes it easier for people to receive the message they're hearing from me. So I love it when we get to travel together.
So, Kathy, as we're closing up, what would you say to people who are as you are kind of in a mixed marriage, being with someone on the spectrum?
I say just always appreciate the benefits and remind yourself of the benefits of being married to a person with this particular uniqueness. And then always take the attitude of a learner and a teacher, both. I'm always learning. I have so much more to learn. I want to learn from Hugh the things that he's strong at. Also learn how to communicate, how to help him, and learn how to help him. I know Hugh wants to love me, so I've learned to give him the benefit of the doubt. But it's hard. You have to remind yourself of that all the time. But knowing that he wants to show love to me, then it means that I have a certain responsibility to let him know how, what something means to me. And if I'm willing to actually take some initiative to explain that and not just expect him to know that, but to tell him what I need and how I need it and what things mean to me and what things don't. That makes all the difference for us.
That makes a difference for me. I've really appreciated that you've been doing that these last few years. So
thanks.
Well, it's been great having you on, and honestly, I think we could keep talking for hours and hours more. I mean, if Allie and I are ever in the California area, we have to get all four of us together sometime.
I would love that. Because, Nick, you and Allie are fascinating people. I love your podcast, and this conversation has been so fun.
And the rest of our team would love to meet you, too. I mean, they've made that clear. So if you're ever in our area, we'd love for you to come by.
Excellent.
Headquarters.
Well, do you all have a blog, website, and email where people can get in touch with you if they want to find out more?
Yeah, I have a Facebook and a Twitter page. I actually answer every question I get on Facebook and Twitter, so people are welcome to take advantage of that. And I have a blog that we post on our reasons.org site. Every week, I write about a new scientific discovery that gives us more evidence for the Christian faith. And I always provide a link on my Facebook page to that blog.
And I have email too. So Nick, I respond to email at kross@reasons.org.
And do you all have any final thoughts you'd like to leave with Deeper Waters audience today?
I would say the most important thing that binds a couple together is having the same value system. If you are both pursuing the same goal, you can be as different as day and night. You can be 20 years different in age or cultural background. You can be as diverse as can be. But if you are aiming toward the same goal in life, and you share that same high value on, say for us, it's the value is advancing the kingdom of God. Nothing can pull you apart.
Dr. Ross, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, namely that if you're both committed to serving the Lord, every year of your marriage will get better than the year before. And you see yourselves becoming more productive, not only in meeting one another's needs, but also in serving the community that God's called you to. So, and you're also going to be able to figure out exactly what kind of ministry you should be in. Married to Kathy's really helped me really focus on where I should be spending my time.
Well, I'd like to thank both of you for coming on. It's been such a blast here, and I do hope we'll see you both back again sometime.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having us. And say hi to Allie for me.
Definitely. And I'd like to remind everyone, next week, we're going to have Ted Wright on talking about archaeology and the Bible, especially the Old Testament, the Exodus, the Conquest, things like that. For now, I'm Nick Peters, and I am signing off.
It all started with a small-time dream. Hold a conference in a church. With a small budget, could we afford to bring in a Christian celebrity speaker? And with an ear to hear more than just the same canned messages, do we want to? With these two questions, The Mentionables were born. We found the best under-the-radar Christian apologists that we could find. Writers, podcasters, and bloggers. Their voice was small, but their message was huge. On May 18th and 19th, The Mentionables will be appearing in Greensboro. Head out to Greensboro Christian Church and hear this grassroots phenomena in action, featuring talks and a great debate. Head over to thementionables.org to get your tickets, or call Greensboro Christian Church at 336-621-5226. The Mentionables. Small-time voices, big-time noise.